Thank you all so much for coming today. I think, it's an appropriate panel to have together on International Women's Day. Also, it's a pretty rare occurrence to, have this many women working in these key creative positions on a TV show. So I figure before we launch into all of that, it would be really great if you guys could give a brief introduction of yourselves and maybe some of the work you've done or are doing right now.
Okay, sure. I'm Maya, and this was my first TV series. And other than doing Workin Moms, I'm still doing feature films and documentaries mostly.
I'm Molly. I'm a writer and director, but on Working Moms, I'm a director. Working Moms was my first episode in TV. I've subsequently done some more and hope to do some more. And on the festival circuit with my feature, Mary Goes Round, at the moment.
I'm Elisa Sauvé, and I am the production designer of Workin Moms, and I work in feature films. This was my first dramatic series. I have worked in television series that were not scripted, or that were scripted but not dramatic, I guess. And I work in feature films. I also work in commercials and in television.
My name is Marilyn Kiewiet. I'm a production designer and art director. I was Elisa's art director on Working Moms. I am currently seeking employment, if you have anything out there for me. And I was very proud to work on an all-female art department. First time for me on Working Moms.
Hi, I'm Lynda McCormack, and I'm the key makeup artist on Working Moms. It's my second year there. And we're coming back for a third, which we're all very excited about. And I work in film and TV, and also very proud to be part of this women's panel and to be part of Working Moms.
Hi, my name's Leanne Morrison, and I've been doing hair for over 30 years, Peggy? Oh, there you are. Peggy and I went to hairdressing school together. Anyway, I was the head of the hair department on Working Moms. I've been doing TV for about 25 years, and this was an extraordinary experience because of all the females that were behind the camera and in front of the camera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm glad there's a third season. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. So it sounds like there are and were a lot of firsts on this show. A first for, it sounded like a few of you to have worked with an all-female art department, your first TV show, directing TV show, your first time shooting TV, your first time doing dramatic narrative.
On television show.
On television,
yeah.
Yeah. So, and it sounds like maybe it's nice to just jump right in here and talk about, what's the difference stepping onto a set that has so many women? What did you come in with? What were your assumptions? Did you know there were going to be that many women in key positions? And what was it like? What was the palpable difference, if there was one?
Just to jump in as someone who has not done TV before, Working Moms, this environment is setting the standard for what's normal for me, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, look at all the women. This is a cool place to be. So I have no point of comparison, which is amazing.
Coming from the independent film world, I'm really used to very diverse crews, this experiencing Working Moms was eye-opening in that I was hearing every day from my other crew members how rare it was for them to experience it. But I feel really lucky that my life so far has looked a lot like this. But it was a bit surprising. But I mean, it shouldn't be surprising. But it was surprising to hear that sort of at the union level, because this was also my first union job. I joined the Camera Guild in order to do this show, and so. Just seeing that reality of the difference between the independent and those of us who had been sort of working on the fringes more so of the industry, and the industry itself being so different.
Just before I jump in, I just want to address this. What do you think the difference is that independent seems to have more diversity as far as your experience versus this union world?
I personally think in this moment in my life, I think it's about trust issues. I think there's more money in the more in the unionized productions. There is more money. The budgets are much bigger, and I do think that we still live in an age where women as keys aren't necessarily trusted with big budgets, and I think it comes down to that. So a lot of people are all kinds of marginalized people are found in the independent world and doing amazing work there and doing really well in film festival circuits and things like that, but not necessarily at those like higher tier budgetary levels. That's just my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has had a similar experience with that, but yeah, that's my theory.
Cool. And we'll just root back to that question that I diverted from. But in a an experience of firsts, what was this like for you guys? Continue along.
I did have an all-woman art department, but it was kind of a fluke because I wasn't looking for women. I was just looking for really good professionals. So it just so happens that the women that I hired, both in the first season and the second season, or the people that I hired for my art department happened to be women. So it was neat, but it's not the first time for me. I think it tends to happen. I like to, I guess, not on purpose, but I tend to surround myself with women. Maybe there's, and men, I guess, that are connected to their artistic, because I do have an artistic creative position where I have to, take pages, words off a page and create, worlds with this. And so it could be that there is something feminine, and I hope nobody holds me to this, but it could be that there's like a feminine side to creativity or openness of dialogue and imagination and creating, I guess. And so whether I do have, for example, my set decorator is a man, and he's a 6 foot tall, big guy, and he is incredibly kind of sensual or sensitive, and so we can connect at this kind of creative level, which tends to be seen as a feminine thing, So that wasn't a first for me to have like a lot of women around, but what was a first, and I totally loved, was when we were doing camera tests, and the first season, so not this year that just passed, the year before, I walked into the stage where we had lights and paint colors and all these things we wanted to look at in front of the camera, and I walked in and I saw Maya and her assistant and the other and the camera operator and all these women on camera, and I did get a chill up my spine. I thought, wow, this rocks, right? Like, it's awesome. Yeah, everybody, right? So that was interesting, and it had a different vibe. I don't know why. Maybe because it's rare that happens, But it did have like a different vibe. It was quite nice for me, anyways.
Anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and this was the first time I have had so many women surrounding me on a project. And I have to say that for me, we all realized it was special, and we talked about it, and we talked about how special it was. And for us, I think we created a real sense of community amongst us. We truly tried to support each other because we want to foster this. We want to foster more women in these positions.
I think from the onset when we had our camera test, and I saw all of these women coming together. And when we walked in and we saw that there was a female camera department, we saw everybody hugging everybody having women speak, everybody collaborating. It wasn't one group being pitted against another. Everybody just had that conversation. And Catherine Reitman, who is the most fantastic human being, who's our director, lead actress, writer, producer, she encouraged it, she put it together, and we knew from the onset that's what she wanted, and that's what she got. And at any given day, when you look behind the monitors, you didn't see very many men, but you saw a lot of wonderful, talented, smart filmmakers.
Having all these women behind the camera and just heads of department was just a lot of respect. Everyone respected each other. There wasn't, if you had a criticism or an idea, it was welcomed. You didn't get scared going up to the big old man that was, we won't get into that. Anyway, it was just very respectful. It was really, really quite a pleasure. And again, I didn't think we really realized how good it was going to be until we were there. And that's it.
Very cool. So shifting gears a little bit then. Just curious what it is in this project that drew you to it from the get-go. Like what is it that you responded to, whether it was from the script, what from the start, or what is it that you look for when you are approached by a project or approach a project, and why did Workin Moms speak to you?
I loved the sizzle. It was like I actually laughed out loud, and I was like, wow, I'm like actually laughing. This is
that
great.
was the exact same thing as me, Maya. The sizzle. The sizzle was like my life.
Yeah.
It was going back to work and having a baby at home very early, et cetera, et cetera. And I watched it 17 times before I interviewed.
Yeah, I met Catherine on Skype, and she was like already radiating her like wonderful vibe, like electronically through the laptop.
Absolutely.
And I was like, I need this woman in my life.
Absolutely.
Cool. And also, I'm just curious about, this is a comedy, and as you said, it's something you actually laugh at, which is fantastic. I don't want to say it's a relief, but but it's a fantastic thing that we've got such a heavy-hitting comedy show that's doing well out there here in Canada and at the CBC. It's awesome. So, in general, how did you keep an eye on comedy within your departments? What did that look like for you as a DP, even hair and makeup? How did you, if that at all applies to you? I'm just curious because it's a funny show and it's actually funny. So what did that mean for your department and your work?
I was initially thinking we would shoot it differently. Like, I didn't think the show would be as sort of like structured and polished as it ended up being, because I thought we would do more like, I thought the camera would play more into comedic timing, like panning or getting a reaction or this type of stuff, But I realized really quickly that a lot of comedy is actually built in the editing, and you have to kind of stay out of the way a little in order for the jokes to be found later, if need be, and things like that. So, yeah, that's how I think I approached it.
Obviously it's a comedy, but there is a lot of heart in the show as well, and honesty. And I think, if you're playing the truth of a character, it's written on the page. Like, thanks to you and the writers, it's all there, right? So if you just play it truthfully to that character, it's likely going to be funny. Mm-hmm. I personally, when I direct, directing for a joke or a punchline rarely plays, and also a comedy is contextual. So, you play it in a 2-shot because you're going to get a great reaction, or you cross shoot, stuff like that.
From a production design standpoint, for me, it's about the characters and creating these worlds that feel real. Although we're a location show and we chose to have Toronto be outside our windows and be like the backdrop, that doesn't, we're building sets into every location that we go. Some sets we built from scratch, and then whether it's that you're changing the furnishings, the painting of the walls, and you're bringing in all the aspects that have to do with each character to support the storyline. So my job, sometimes through my department, through props or certain set deck pieces, there's things that support comedy, but mostly what production design is, we're just supporting the story, and then the directors, the actors, and the camera are kind of, highlighting those moments.
Yeah, like I think of Brad's self-help book that played out as a key prop, and just the prop itself was so beautifully done and perfect, and you don't have to say anything more. Just push in on that, and there's your transition. Yeah, something
I love to think about is that like a shot can always, if whenever possible, be about more than one thing. And I think like with what you've done with the production design in the art department and things like those props and stuff, is like there's always a way you can layer a shot so that there's like humor happening or information there.
Baseline. This, I don't know if you've watched the show. You should if you haven't. Kate gets a job at a kind of groovy Google type office. It's called Baseline, and we built that from scratch in an empty space. And that space for me had complete comedy, because it's the comedy of that absurd kind of like green walls and sitting on balls and, the purple office. And, there was, behind the lead, the boss of the office, I thought it would be very funny that his artwork would be a photograph of like a really old PC computer, but his office was like paperless and, and so there was comedy in that set because the story called for it, the absurdity of that kind of world, but it wouldn't have been something that, there's no point for it if the story doesn't call for it, I guess.
Comedy was the flashback episode and all the wigs. That was funny.
They were
and
amazing.
I only had 4 days to prep. So luckily it was a comedy because some of them looked pretty funny.
And they look great.
I think at any given moment we had 8 to 10 females in the hair and makeup truck processing them in the wee hours of the morning. The doors would be open sometimes because somebody was in perimenopause. Somebody had their period. Somebody stayed up tonight because their child was being sick. But we found humor in all of it, and we laughed all the way through it. The embodiment of those women and their humor got us all through some very long days. And the hair and makeup, there were some discussions that if you girls were flies on a wall, you would be so proud.
Do you guys think that Workin Moms is for women or working moms only?
We grew up watching and reading narratives told by men, often about us, but by them. And I'll speak for myself. I have become really, really used to relating to men's narratives and through music and stuff as well. And we're kind of missing out on an opportunity to give men the chance to relate back to us unless we're writing and making these types of shows and movies, because that's so enriching. It's been enriching for me to relate to men my whole life. Why wouldn't it work the other way around?
Also, I think it's one of the reasons we're here too is to sort of ask. I want to ask you guys, because I bet there are people in the audience who are wondering this as well. How did you get to where you are today in your departments and in what you're doing? And maybe there's a piece of advice you could give to people who are pushing ahead.
Yeah, just working on whatever was interesting to me and expanding my network kind of organically, luckily. But I did go to film school, which kind of launched that community. It was important for me to find a community first when I was 18, and so I did it that way, and then just continuing to make work independently until one day someone decides you're a professional, and then that's it.
Yeah. You just have to be relentless and persistent. And for me, it's losing the perfectionism a little bit in favor of persistence. My advice is to have a life as well and focus less on the career, because you kind of need to have... You have to live a life to be in this industry, to create worlds and relate to actors and bring an interpretation about what you're reading. So I would just live a life, and when you're not living a life, be shooting.
So I took a really long road that had many forks, and I always thought I was going somewhere differently. I have a very eclectic background, and I collaborated, and I surrounded myself always with talented and wonderful people. And I think I always, stay open, be fair, be just. Be generous, yes. Spread the love, because there's enough for everybody, and just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to fly, because what's the worst thing that could happen?
I started in this industry by fluke. I fell into it not knowing at all what an art department or an art director or a production designer did. I graduated from the School of Interior Design at Ryerson in the middle of the recession. And didn't have work, and a friend of mine who was an art director said, "Oh, come work with me. We'll show you what to do." And I had the skills. I had graphic skills, and I had drafting skills. I had fine art skills, but I had no clue what an art department did, and basically learned from the ground up. I've done every job in the art department, and I've done it for several years. If I needed education, I went back to night school or did what I needed to do. I had my daughter in the middle of all this. I was an early working mom, so I can relate to a lot of the stories. And I just feel blessed to have had any opportunity brought to the table and taken it. So even if it's something that you don't think you're qualified for or something that doesn't really interest you, it still might offer you an opportunity to learn. And as long as you open yourself up to learning at every opportunity, it will carry you further.
Normally went to school for makeup, picked up a book. It was cheaper to do that. There weren't any makeup schools at the time. I was a single mom of 2 kids, couldn't afford to really take on a makeup course. Kind of bent the truth a little to get into a couple shows. My first few non-union shows, I did hair, makeup, wardrobe, and continuity. So I kind of learned a little bit of all of that and proceeded. I have 2 great supportive daughters. I work hard, but I try and give back by, in between projects, I teach at 2 community colleges and try and give back to makeup people, to a new generation coming in, and giving them everything that I've learned, because I think that that's what we should be doing.
I'm a born hairstylist. I've always done hair, but I did not like being in a salon environment. I found it very backstabbing and sort of closed and like a conveyor belt. So I'd play around with that, and I'd do all kinds of other jobs. I moved downtown because I live in Richmond Hill. Anyway, I ended up living with somebody who just brought me to their set because they were working on RoboCop, the series, I think, in the early 90s. Anyways, I fell into the film industry. I loved it. It was ever-changing. The people were great. And if you didn't like one show, you could go to the next show. And anyway, like what Elisa was saying, we all get paranoid. Sometimes we're like, why isn't the phone ringing? Why isn't the phone ringing? Nobody, maybe I did something wrong. And then all of a sudden you'll get a gig and you just keep on going and so forth. And it just always works out. You just have to keep at it.
Great. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Hannah.